He built an empire, but never knew he had a family. 12 years after the love of his life vanished, a millionaire restaurateur locks eyes with her across the room and sees two identical boys standing by her side. Boys who look just like him. Before he can demand the truth, one of them suddenly collapses, gasping for air. As old wounds reopen and long-buried secrets come to light, one question remains. Will he fight for the family he never knew, or lose them all over again? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. And if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow's special episode is one you definitely don't want to miss. Nicholas Barrett surveyed his flagship restaurant with the practiced eye of a man who had built an empire from scratch. The soft lighting caught the crystal glasses, making them shimmer like diamonds across white tablecloths. Waiters glided between tables with the precision of dancers, their movements as carefully choreographed as the 5-course menu he'd personally designed for tonight's event. "The Kensington Group seems impressed," murmured Elise, his executive assistant, appearing at his elbow. "Mr. Townsend hasn't stopped raving about the truffled risotto." Nicholas nodded, his expression neutral despite the significance of the evening. The Kensington deal would expand his restaurant chain internationally, the culmination of 12 years of relentless work. "Good. Make sure their glasses stay filled." His voice was steady, controlled. That control shattered when the maitre d' escorted a party of 3 to a table near the window. Nicholas froze mid-step. The woman's chestnut hair caught the light as she turned to say something to the children beside her. Even in profile, he'd know that face anywhere. Vivian. 12 years evaporated in an instant. His chest tightened as though someone had reached in and squeezed his heart with bare hands. But it was the 2 boys settling into chairs beside her that truly stole his breath. Identical twins, about 11 years old, with dark hair that fell across their foreheads in the same way his did in childhood photographs. One laughed at something Vivian said, revealing a familiar smile that Nicholas saw every morning in his bathroom mirror. The room tilted beneath his feet. "Nicholas, are you all right?" Elise's voice seemed to come from far away. He forced himself to breathe. "Fine. I'm fine." "You look like you've seen a ghost." He almost laughed. A ghost would have been easier to face than this reality. Vivian Winters sitting in his restaurant with 2 boys who could only be his sons. "Mr. Barrett, the Kensingtons are asking about the expansion timeline." The words barely registered as Nicholas stared across the room, memories flooding back like a broken dam. Vivienne in his kitchen, flour on her cheek as she attempted his grandmother's recipe. Vivienne curled against him on Sunday mornings, planning their future. Vivienne's tearful face the night he'd worked through their anniversary dinner. And finally, the note she'd left. "I can't be second to your ambition anymore. I deserve better. Goodbye." He'd come home to an empty apartment, her key on the counter, and a hole in his life he'd filled with 18-hour workdays and international acclaim. "Nicholas?" Elise prompted again. "Tell them 5 minutes." He straightened his tie, a physical attempt to collect himself. "I need to check something in the kitchen first." He didn't go to the kitchen. Instead, he circled the dining room, keeping to the shadows, watching the table by the window. The boys were animated, one pointing excitedly at the menu while the other whispered something that made Vivian laugh. That same musical laugh that had once been the soundtrack to his happiest days. 11 years old. The timing aligned perfectly with their breakup. She must have been pregnant when she left. His sons. The word echoed in his mind, foreign yet undeniable. He had sons who had grown up without knowing him, who had his eyes, his smile, his features. Why hadn't she told him? The question burned like acid. Throughout the business dinner, Nicholas performed his role flawlessly, discussing expansion plans, profit margins, and brand consistency, while his attention remained divided. Every few minutes, his gaze drifted to Vivian's table, cataloging details. How one boy gestured with his hands exactly as Nicholas did when excited. How the other had his serious, contemplative expression when reading the menu. The Kensington party finally departed, leaving Nicholas free to do what he'd been restraining himself from all evening. He strode across the restaurant, his heart hammering against his ribs. The twins noticed him first, their identical blue eyes, his eyes widening as he approached. When the sommelier approached their table, Vivian looked up and directly into Nicholas's eyes. The connection was immediate and electric. Her honey-brown eyes widened in recognition, then shock. The color drained from her face. For a suspended moment, 12 years collapsed between them, leaving only the raw, unresolved emotions they'd never properly confronted. She whispered something to the boys and stood up, her napkin falling forgotten to the floor. Nicholas rose from his chair without excusing himself, drawn toward her by a force stronger than gravity. Their paths were set to collide, with two innocent boys caught in the middle of a truth too long concealed. Vivian was gathering her purse when she sensed his presence. She froze, her knuckles whitening as she gripped the strap. "Hello, Vivian." His voice was surprisingly steady. "Nicholas." She breathed his name like a prayer or a curse. The boys glanced between them, confusion evident on their young faces. Nicholas couldn't stop staring at them, drinking in every detail he'd missed for 11 years. "Mom?" the slightly taller twin asked. "Who's this?" Nicholas extended his hand before Vivian could answer. "I'm Nicholas Barrett. I own this restaurant." He paused, swallowing hard. "And I'm an old friend of your mother's." "I'm Luke," said the taller boy, shaking his hand with surprising firmness. "I'm Liam," the other twin added, his grip gentler but his gaze just as direct. Nicholas nodded, committing their names to memory. "It's very nice to meet you both." The inadequacy of those words nearly choked him. "Would you mind if I borrowed your mother for a few minutes? We have some catching up to do." "Mom?" Luke looked to Vivian, protectiveness evident in his stance. She nodded stiffly. "It's fine. I'll just be a few minutes." "My office is more private," Nicholas said, gesturing toward the back of the restaurant. As they walked away, Nicholas heard Liam whisper, "He looks like us." "Don't be stupid," Luke hissed back. Nicholas closed his office door behind them. The space felt suddenly too small with Vivian in it, her familiar scent bringing back memories he'd spent years trying to forget. "They're mine, aren't they?" He didn't bother with preamble. Vivian lifted her chin. "Yes." The confirmation hit him like a physical blow. He gripped the edge of his desk, steadying himself. "How could you keep this from me?" His voice rose despite his effort to control it. 11 years, Vivian. 11 years of their lives. Gone. Birthdays, first steps, first words. Everything. You made your priorities very clear. Her voice trembled with old hurt. "What are you talking about?" "I heard you that night, Nicholas, at the investor dinner. Family is a distraction I can't afford. My restaurants will always come first." She quoted his words back to him, each one a dagger. "I found out I was pregnant the next day. What was I supposed to do?" Nicholas staggered back as if she'd struck him. "That conversation? With Malcolm Reed?" He ran a hand through his hair. "God, Vivian, I was telling him what he wanted to hear. He'd just lost half his fortune in a divorce. I was protecting our investment." "Our investment?" Her laugh was bitter. "There was never an hour with you, Nicholas. It was always your dream, your ambition." "That's not true." His voice dropped. "I had the ring in my pocket that very night." Vivian's eyes widened. "What?" Nicholas moved to his safe, dialing the combination with practiced ease. From inside, he withdrew a small velvet box, dusty with age. He placed it on the desk between them. "I was going to propose the next weekend. Had the whole evening planned." His laugh was hollow. "And then you were just gone." Vivian stared at the box, her hand trembling as she reached toward it but stopped short of touching it. "You kept it all this time." I couldn't let it go. The admission cost him. Just like I couldn't let you go, not really. You never came after me. Your note made it clear you didn't want to be found. Pain laced his words. But if I'd known about them, his voice broke. How could you think I wouldn't want my own children? The door creaked slightly. They both turned to see two identical faces peering through the gap, eyes wide with shock. "Dad?" Liam whispered, the word experimental on his tongue. Luke pushed the door wider. "You're our father?" The question hung in the air between them, 11 years of absence distilled into 4 simple words. Nicholas looked from the boys to Vivian, whose eyes filled with tears. "Yes," Nicholas answered, his voice rough with emotion. "I'm your father, though I'm just finding out about it myself." The twins exchanged a look, a silent communication that spoke of years of shared secrets. "You said our dad didn't want us," Luke accused Vivian, hurt evident in his voice. "I thought," Vivian began, then stopped, looking lost. "I've wanted you both every day of my life," Nicholas said firmly. "I just didn't know you existed." The tension in the room hung thick as the twins stared at their newly discovered father. Luke's face had hardened into a mask of suspicion, while Liam's expression cycled through confusion, wonder, and uncertainty. "You can't just show up and—" Luke began, but stopped abruptly when Liam started coughing. At first, it seemed like nothing, just a nervous reaction to the charged atmosphere. But Nicholas noticed the way Liam's hand flew to his throat, the sudden pallor washing over his face. "Liam," Vivian was already moving toward him, maternal instinct kicking in. "Did you eat something at the table?" Liam nodded, his breathing becoming audibly labored. The sauce," he wheezed. "I think it had—" He couldn't finish the sentence as his lips began to swell. "Nuts," Vivian finished, panic rising in her voice. "Where's your EpiPen?" "Left it home," Liam managed between increasingly desperate gasps. Nicholas recognized the signs immediately. The restaurant industry had taught him to be vigilant about allergic reactions. Without hesitation, he moved to a cabinet near his desk. "I keep emergency medical supplies here," he explained, retrieving a small case. His hands were steady as he pulled out an EpiPen. "Food allergies are common enough in restaurants. I make sure all my staff are trained." Vivian watched with wide eyes as Nicholas knelt beside Liam, whose breathing had become frighteningly shallow. "I'm going to help you, Liam," Nicholas said calmly. "This will hurt for a second, but then you'll be able to breathe better. Okay?" Liam nodded weakly, fear evident in his eyes so like Nicholas's own. With practiced efficiency, Nicholas administered the epinephrine, then immediately pulled out his phone. "I'm calling an ambulance. The EpiPen buys us time, but he needs to be checked at a hospital." Luke had moved to his brother's side, gripping Liam's hand tightly. "Breathe, Liam. Just breathe." Within minutes, the wail of sirens announced the ambulance's arrival. Nicholas led the paramedics to his office, explaining the situation with calm authority. As they loaded Liam onto a stretcher, Vivian never left their son's side. "I'm coming with him," she said, her voice allowing no argument. "We'll follow in my car," Nicholas told Luke, who looked torn between staying with his mother and brother or avoiding being alone with this stranger claiming to be their father. The ride to the hospital passed in tense silence, broken only when Luke finally spoke. "This happens sometimes," he said, staring out the window. "Liam's allergies. Mom usually catches it before he eats anything wrong." Nicholas glanced at the boy, his son, noting the worry etched across his young face. "Has it been this bad before?" Luke nodded. 3 times. Once when we were 7, again last year, and now. He hesitated. "The hospital bills are always hard." Nicholas absorbed this information, another piece of the life he'd missed falling into place. In the hospital waiting room, Vivian paced while Nicholas and Luke sat in uncomfortable plastic chairs. When a nurse approached with a clipboard and forms, Vivian's shoulders sagged visibly. "Insurance information?" the nurse asked. "We're between coverage right now," Vivian admitted quietly. "I can set up a payment plan." Nicholas stood. "Put it under my insurance," he said, pulling out his wallet. "He's my son." The look Vivian gave him was complex. Gratitude mingled with pride and a hint of defensiveness. "That's not necessary." "It is to me," Nicholas replied simply. When the doctor finally emerged, his news was reassuring. "Liam's responding well. We'll keep him for observation, but he should be able to go home tomorrow." "Thank you," Vivian breathed. "I see from his records this isn't his first severe reaction," the doctor noted. "You might want to consider seeing an allergy specialist for more comprehensive management." As the doctor left, Nicholas turned to Vivienne. "More comprehensive management?" "It's expensive," she said softly. "Since I lost my job when Hartford Design downsized. Things have been tight." Luke, who had been pretending not to listen, added, "Mom's been freelancing, but Liam's medicine costs a lot." Nicholas watched as Vivian tried to silence Luke with a look. "He's drawing all the time," Luke continued, seemingly determined to make Nicholas understand their lives. "Liam, I mean, he's really good. I'm better at math." "Luke," Vivian warned. "What? He should know something about us if he's our dad," Luke challenged, the word dad still awkward on his tongue. Nicholas felt a surge of emotion, pride, sorrow, and determination, all at once. He'd missed 11 years of his sons' lives, their personalities, their talents, their struggles. The thought of Liam in the hospital before, without him there, of Vivian shouldering mounting medical bills alone, struck him like a physical blow. "Can I see him?" Nicholas asked quietly. Vivian hesitated, then nodded. "For a few minutes. He needs rest." As they walked toward Liam's room, the truce between them felt fragile but real, forged in the crucible of parental concern that transcended their complicated past. In the soft light of the hospital room, Liam looked smaller than his 11 years, connected to monitors that beeped steadily. Nicholas stood in the doorway, watching his son's chest rise and fall with each breath. The boy's dark hair, so like his own, fell across his forehead, and his hands, even in sleep, seemed to move slightly, as if creating invisible art. "He's always been the more fragile one," Vivian said quietly, standing beside Nicholas, "but he's stronger than he looks." Nicholas nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. This child, his child, had faced health battles without him, had spent nights in hospital rooms like this one, while Nicholas remained oblivious, building restaurants and chasing success that suddenly seemed hollow. "I want to help," he finally said, "not just with the medical bills, with everything." Vivian stiffened. "We've managed for 11 years. But you don't have to manage alone anymore." Nicholas turned to face her. "I have a proposal." The following morning, after Liam was discharged, Nicholas met them at a cafe near the hospital. Luke sat protectively close to his brother, while Vivian watched Nicholas with cautious eyes. "Hartford Design had a solid reputation," Nicholas said after they'd ordered. "Your portfolio is impressive." Vivian raised an eyebrow. "You looked me up?" "I did." Nicholas leaned forward. 3 of my restaurants need redesigning. The Chicago location especially has never felt right." Understanding dawned on Vivian's face. "You're offering me a job." "A contract," Nicholas corrected. "Your own company handling the redesigns. You'd maintain complete independence, set your own hours. And you'd get access to the boys," Vivian said, cutting to the heart of it. Nicholas didn't deny it. Yes, I've missed 11 years. I don't want to miss any more. Luke and Liam exchanged glances, their twin connection evident in the wordless communication. Would we have to move? Luke asked. No, Nicholas assured them. Your mother would work primarily from her home office, with site visits as needed. Vivian stirred her coffee, considering. The terms would be strictly professional. Of course, Nicholas agreed, though they both knew the boundaries between their professional and personal history would be anything but clear. I want it in writing, she said finally, and I want final approval on all designs. Nicholas nodded. Done. 3 days later, Nicholas invited the twins to tour his flagship restaurant, Barrett's. The boys entered wide-eyed, taking in the elegant space that was empty of customers in the late afternoon. This is where it all started, Nicholas explained, leading them toward the kitchen. My grandmother's recipes were the foundation. In the gleaming industrial kitchen, staff prepared for the evening service, moving with practiced efficiency. Nicholas introduced the twins to his head chef, who greeted them warmly. Today, Nicholas said, helping the boys wash their hands at a sink, I'm going to teach you to make the dish that started everything. He guided them through the preparation of his grandmother's spinach and ricotta ravioli, showing Liam how to roll the pasta dough to the perfect thickness and teaching Luke the precise measurements for the filling. Cooking is both art and science, Nicholas explained, noticing how Liam was drawn to the creative aspects while Luke focused intently on the exact proportions. You need both to make something truly exceptional. The boys remained cautious but engaged, asking questions and gradually relaxing as flour dusted their clothes and cheeks. When they finally tasted their creation, their faces lit up with genuine smiles. This is way better than the frozen stuff Mom buys, Luke admitted. Later that week, Nicholas arrived at Vivian's apartment to pick up the boys for dinner. The modest 2-bedroom unit was warm and inviting despite its small size, filled with Liam's artwork and evidence of a home created with love rather than money. While waiting for the twins to get ready, Nicholas noticed a small bookshelf in the corner. Among the volumes was a familiar leather-bound book, a collection of Italian poetry he'd given Vivienne for their 2nd anniversary. Beside it sat a small wooden box he recognized immediately. Heart-quickening, he opened it to find ticket stubs from their first date, dried flowers from bouquets he'd given her, and a photograph of them laughing together on the beach. They're ready, Vivian's voice came suddenly from behind him. Nicholas turned, caught in the moment of discovery. Their eyes met, and the air between them charged with unspoken words. You kept these, he said softly. Vivian quickly closed the box, her cheeks flushing. The boys need their jackets. It's getting chilly out. The moment passed, but Nicholas carried the knowledge with him as the twins bounded into the room. Vivian might have built walls around her heart, but she had never completely dismantled the bridge between them. One crisp morning, Vivian sat at the drafting table Nicholas had installed in a corner of his executive office, sketching concept designs for the Chicago restaurant. Sunlight streamed through the windows, catching the honey highlights in her hair as she worked. Nicholas found himself stealing glances at her between meetings, watching the familiar way she bit her lower lip when concentrating. These preliminary designs are exceptional, Nicholas said, examining her portfolio spread across the conference table later that afternoon. You've captured exactly what Barrett's Chicago has been missing. His executive team nodded in agreement, impressed by Vivian's vision of warmth and sophistication that would transform the coldest of his restaurant locations. The lighting concept especially, said his operations director. It creates intimacy without sacrificing visibility. Vivian smiled, professional but pleased. I remembered how important that balance was to you, she said to Nicholas. Your grandmother's recipes deserve to be seen clearly, but diners still want to feel they're in their own private world. Nicholas felt a rush of warmth that she'd remembered such a specific detail from their conversations years ago. You always understood that better than anyone. Their eyes held for a moment too long before Vivienne looked away, gathering her sketches. I should have the full proposal ready by next week. Working in such proximity daily made it impossible to maintain the strict boundaries they'd established. Small moments accumulated, a brush of hands when passing documents, shared laughter over an unexpected memory, the electric awareness whenever they stood close reviewing plans. Meanwhile, Nicholas devoted his free time to building relationships with his sons. He discovered Luke's sharp mind for numbers when the boy calculated the profit margin on a signature dish faster than Nicholas could reach for a calculator. "How did you figure that so quickly?" Nicholas asked, genuinely impressed. Luke shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant, though pride flickered in his eyes. "Math makes sense. It's just patterns." "That's exactly what makes a good businessman," Nicholas told him, seeing patterns others miss. With Liam, the connection came through creativity. Nicholas found him sketching designs for plate presentations that showed remarkable artistic intuition. "Have you ever thought about food styling?" Nicholas asked, examining Liam's drawing of a deconstructed tiramisu. Liam looked up, surprised by the interest. "Mom says I have good taste, but I didn't know that was a real job." "It absolutely is," Nicholas assured him, "and a crucial one." The breakthrough came on a rainy Saturday when Vivienne had a migraine. Nicholas offered to take the boys for the day, bringing them to his penthouse apartment. "I thought we could make something special for your mom," Nicholas suggested, leading them into his professional-grade home kitchen. "Something that might help her feel better." As they gathered ingredients, Nicholas began sharing stories about his own childhood. "My parents weren't around much," he told them, showing Luke how to properly measure flour. "My grandmother raised me in her tiny apartment above a laundromat." "Where were your parents?" Liam asked, carefully cracking eggs into a bowl. Nicholas paused, weighing his answer. "My father left before I was born. My mother, she had her own struggles. She loved me, but couldn't take care of me." "Like how Mom has to take care of us alone?" Luke asked pointedly. "No," Nicholas said gently. "Your mother chose to be there for you every day. She's remarkable that way." He added more softly, "If I'd known about you, I would have chosen that too." As they worked, Nicholas showed them how to make his grandmother's chicken soup, the recipe that had comforted him through childhood illnesses. "When I was sick, this was the only thing that made me feel better," he explained, demonstrating how to chop vegetables in uniform pieces. "My grandmother used to say food was medicine for both body and soul." Liam nodded seriously. "That's how I feel about drawing. It makes everything better inside." For the first time, the boys seemed truly comfortable with him, asking questions about his childhood and laughing at his stories of kitchen disasters. From the doorway of Nicholas's office, Theodore Walsh watched Vivian and Nicholas leaning over design plans, their heads close together as they laughed about some shared memory. His fingers tightened around his coffee cup, jaw clenching at their easy intimacy. Later, finding Vivienne alone in the design studio, Theodore approached with a concerned expression perfectly crafted to mask his intentions. "The designs look wonderful," he said, examining her sketches. "Nicholas seems quite invested in your vision." "He's always had good taste," Vivienne replied, focused on her work. Theodore nodded thoughtfully. "It's remarkable how quickly he's embraced fatherhood after all these years." He paused deliberately, especially given his previous priorities. Vivian's pencil hesitated mid-stroke. "What do you mean?" "Oh, nothing really." Theodore waved dismissively. "It's just that Nicholas has always been so focused on expansion. 3 new locations this year alone." He sighed sympathetically. "I hope the boys don't get disappointed when his attention inevitably shifts back to business." The seed of doubt planted, Theodore excused himself, leaving Vivienne staring at her designs with a troubled expression. Later, Theodore sat in his office, fingers steepled beneath his chin as he studied Nicholas's schedule on his tablet. The restaurant empire's shared calendar revealed exactly what he needed. Nicholas had planned to take the twins fishing on Saturday, their first overnight trip together. Perfect. Theodore made 3 calls, then strode confidently to Nicholas's office. Just confirmed the investors from Singapore for Saturday, Theodore announced, leaning against the doorframe. They can only meet that day before flying out. Nicholas looked up, frowning. Saturday? That's impossible. I've had plans with the boys for weeks. Plans that can be rescheduled, Theodore suggested smoothly. These investors represent $30 million in potential funding for the Miami expansion. Surely the boys will understand that business occasionally comes first. Nicholas's jaw tightened. Find another solution, Theodore. I'm not canceling on my sons. Of course. Theodore nodded, the picture of understanding. I'll see what I can do. He turned to leave, then paused. Though it does send a certain message to potential investors about our priorities. After Theodore left, Nicholas stared at his calendar, conflict evident on his face. The next day, Vivienne was reviewing fabric samples when Theodore appeared with coffee. Just how you like it. Hazelnut with almond milk, he said, setting it beside her sketches. Thank you, Vivienne said, surprised by the thoughtfulness. Theodore glanced at her designs. Beautiful work. Nicholas is lucky to have found someone so talented. He paused. And the boys are adapting well to their new circumstances? They're cautious, but yes, Vivienne replied. Nicholas has been making real efforts. That's wonderful to hear, Theodore said, his voice warm while his eyes remained cold. Nicholas has always been strategic about his legacy. The restaurants were just the beginning. Having heirs to continue the Barrett empire completes the picture. Vivienne's hand stilled. The boys aren't business assets, Theodore. Of course not. He backpedaled smoothly. I only meant Nicholas has always thought long-term. Building something to pass down is important to him. He checked his watch. Speaking of which, did Nicholas mention he's meeting with investors Saturday instead of that fishing trip? Business realities, unfortunately. He left Vivienne staring after him, doubt clouding her expression. That evening, Nicholas called to tell the boys he had to reschedule their trip. Luke's disappointment was palpable even through the phone, while Liam said nothing at all. Later that week, Vivienne found Nicholas in the test kitchen after hours. The Singapore investors were impressed, she asked, her voice carefully neutral. Nicholas looked up from the sauce he was reducing. What investors? From Saturday, the meeting that replaced the fishing trip. Nicholas's expression darkened. There was no meeting. I rescheduled with them for next month. Then why cancel with the boys? Confusion and anger flashed across Vivienne's face. I didn't... Nicholas stopped, understanding dawning. Theodore told you I took the meeting? He mentioned it, yes. Vivienne crossed her arms. What's really going on, Nicholas? 1 minute you're desperate to be part of their lives. The next you're canceling plans. If this is just about establishing your claim. My claim. Nicholas set down his spoon with more force than necessary. Is that what you think this is about? I don't know what to think. You spent years focused solely on your restaurants. Now suddenly you want to be Father of the Year? Because I didn't know they existed. Nicholas's voice rose. You made that decision for all of us. Based on what you said, that you never wanted a family to distract from your ambitions. I said a lot of stupid things back then, Nicholas admitted, his anger deflating. But the truth is, Vivienne, all of this, he gestured around the kitchen, it's meant nothing without someone to share it with. The vulnerability in his voice made her pause. Do you know what I do on Christmas mornings? He continued quietly. I come to an empty restaurant and cook a full holiday meal that I don't eat. Success feels hollow when you're alone. Before Vivienne could respond, they heard a crash from the dining room. They rushed out to find Theodore with the twins, who had apparently dropped a tray of glasses. "I was just giving the boys a tour," Theodore explained smoothly. "We were discussing Nicholas's journey to success. I mentioned that famous interview where you said family would be a distraction from your ambitions." The boys seemed surprised. Nicholas's face went pale as he looked at his son's expressions. Luke's angry, Liam's hurt. "That's not what I meant," Nicholas started, but Luke cut him off. "We heard enough," Luke said coldly, moving closer to his brother. "Mom was right about you all along." As they turned away, Nicholas saw Theodore's satisfied smile vanish behind a mask of concern. Nicholas stood frozen as his sons walked away, the hurt in their eyes cutting deeper than any business setback he'd ever faced. Theodore placed a sympathetic hand on his shoulder, but Nicholas shrugged it off, suddenly seeing the calculated timing of this accidental revelation. "That was no coincidence," Nicholas said quietly, after the boys were out of earshot. Theodore's expression remained neutral. "They deserve to know who their father really is." "You deliberately took my words out of context," Nicholas said, his voice dangerously low. "I simply repeated what you said. If you're having regrets about your priorities now, that's hardly my fault." Before Nicholas could respond, Vivian approached, her face tight with concern after witnessing the boys' retreat. Theodore excused himself with practiced politeness. "What happened?" she asked. "Theodore happened," Nicholas replied, "and I need to fix this." Over the next week, Nicholas made dramatic changes to his schedule. When his assistant informed him that a critical investor meeting conflicted with Luke's math competition, Nicholas didn't hesitate. "Reschedule the investors," he said firmly. "But sir, they're flying in from Tokyo, specifically. Then they can enjoy the city for an extra day. My son comes first." At the competition, Nicholas sat beside Vivian, conscious of Luke's stiff posture when he noticed his father's arrival. When Luke's team won first place, Nicholas stood and applauded loudly, pride evident on his face. Luke's eyes briefly met his, a flicker of surprise replacing the coldness. 2 days later, Nicholas slipped out of a strategy meeting early to attend Liam's art showcase. He arrived just as Liam was explaining his landscape drawing to a small group. "The perspective was tricky," Liam was saying, unaware of Nicholas's presence. "The depth you've created is remarkable," Nicholas commented, causing Liam to turn in surprise. "You've captured how the light changes across distance." Later, as other families dispersed, Nicholas approached Liam, who was struggling with a new sketch. "May I?" Nicholas asked, gesturing to the empty chair beside him. Liam shrugged, which Nicholas took as permission. "I used to draw with your great-grandmother," Nicholas said softly. "She taught me that light and shadow are what give a drawing life." He demonstrated a technique on a spare piece of paper. "See how the pressure changes the depth?" As Liam tried the technique, his drawing transformed. For the first time since Theodore's revelation, Liam smiled at Nicholas. "I have something to show you," Nicholas said, reaching into his pocket and producing a small velvet box. He opened it to reveal an elegant diamond ring. Liam's eyes widened. "Is that—" "The ring I was going to give your mother 12 years ago," Nicholas confirmed. "I've kept it all this time." "Why didn't you give it to her?" Nicholas sighed. "I was going to propose the same night she overheard me talking to that investor. What she heard was me protecting myself. I was afraid of rejection, so I said I didn't want a family. But the truth was, I had this ring in my pocket." Liam touched the ring gently. "You really were going to ask her to marry you." "I had the whole evening planned," Nicholas admitted. "I never got the chance." Meanwhile, at Nicholas's home, Vivian was searching his office for a portfolio of vintage restaurant designs he'd mentioned. Opening a drawer in his desk, she found a bundle of envelopes tied with a faded ribbon. Her own name was written on each one in Nicholas's distinctive handwriting. With trembling fingers, she opened the first letter. "Vivian, it's been 3 months since you left. I keep thinking you'll walk through the door. The restaurant is succeeding beyond my expectations, but none of it matters without you. I dream of the family we could have had. Weekend mornings making pancakes together, teaching our children to cook my grandmother's recipes. She moved to the next letter, and the next, each one revealing Nicholas's longing, not just for her, but for the family life they might have shared. None had ever been sent. That evening, they gathered for dinner at Nicholas's home, a meal he had prepared himself. To everyone's surprise, the atmosphere was different. Luke asked Nicholas about business strategies. Liam showed his mother the drawing technique Nicholas had taught him. When Nicholas made a self-deprecating joke about his first failed restaurant attempt, genuine laughter rippled around the table. For the first time, they felt like a family, connected, comfortable, complete. Across town, Theodore sat in his darkened office making a call. "Yes, I have the documents. Barrett's restaurants have been cutting corners on food safety for years." He smiled coldly. By this time next week, his empire will be in ruins. The next day, the headline splashed across every major news outlet in the city. Barrett restaurants under investigation, food safety violations endanger public. Nicholas stared at his phone in disbelief as notifications flooded in, each one another blow to the reputation he'd spent decades building. "This can't be right," he muttered, scrolling through the article detailing alleged contamination at 3 of his restaurants. His hands trembled as he read accusations of deliberate cost-cutting that had led to customer illnesses. Nicholas immediately called an emergency meeting with his management team. The conference room buzzed with tension as staff members exchanged worried glances. "These allegations are completely false," Nicholas stated firmly, though his voice carried an undercurrent of devastation. "My grandmother taught me that quality and care were non-negotiable. I've never compromised on food safety, not once in 20 years." As Nicholas worked tirelessly through the night, canceling all personal plans to address the crisis, Vivian pored over the reports at home. With her design work for Nicholas's restaurants, she'd gained access to vendor contracts and operational documents. Something wasn't adding up. "Mom, are you still looking at those papers?" Luke asked, padding into the kitchen in his pajamas despite the late hour. "These inspection dates don't match the supplier deliveries," Vivian murmured, spreading documents across the table. "And look at these signatures. They're inconsistent." Luke leaned over her shoulder, his analytical mind immediately engaged. "Can I see those?" He studied the papers with the same intensity Nicholas often displayed in business meetings. "The contamination incidents all happened on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Those are the days Mr. Walsh oversees inventory, right?" The next morning, Liam and Luke huddled in their bedroom, surrounded by printouts of emails they'd found in the restaurant database while helping their mother organize design files. "Look at this one." Liam pointed to an email from Theodore to a supplier. He specifically requested alternate sourcing for the shipments he personally received, claiming it was a test market program. Luke nodded grimly. And here, he diverted the regular safety inspection team on those exact dates, bringing in a different inspector who only checked the deliveries he hadn't handled. The boys exchanged a significant look, the pieces falling into place. "He's trying to destroy Dad's restaurants," Liam said quietly, the word Dad slipping out naturally for the first time. That afternoon, they brought their findings to Vivian, spreading emails and delivery records across her desk. "We think Mr. Walsh is behind the contamination," Luke explained, pointing to the evidence they'd gathered. Vivian's face paled as she connected the dots. This isn't just professional sabotage, she realized. Theodore's jealousy goes deeper than I thought. He's always wanted what Nicholas has, his success, his recognition. She paused, a chill running through her. And me. Meanwhile, Nicholas sat in his office, staring blankly at the initial buyout papers Theodore had just placed before him. The restaurant's stock value had plummeted 60% in 2 days. It's the only way to salvage anything from this mess, Theodore said, his voice dripping with practiced sympathy while his eyes gleamed with triumph. Sell me your controlling shares now, before the value drops further. Nicholas ran his hand over the embossed logo on the papers, his grandmother's recipe book, the symbol of everything he'd built. I need time to think, he said hollowly. Theodore nodded, barely concealing his satisfaction. Don't take too long. By this time tomorrow, those health department fines could bankrupt you. He placed a falsely comforting hand on Nicholas's shoulder. I hate seeing your grandmother's legacy end this way. As Theodore left, Nicholas picked up a framed photo from his desk, his grandmother standing proudly in front of his first restaurant. He'd promised her that quality would never be compromised. The thought that customers believed he'd betrayed that promise cut deeper than any financial loss. His phone buzzed with a text from Vivian. Don't sign anything. The boys and I found something. Coming to your office now. The fluorescent lights in Nicholas's office cast harsh shadows across the scattered papers covering his desk. It was nearly midnight, but neither he nor Vivian had noticed the hours slipping away as they combed through contamination reports and supplier records. These delivery manifests confirm what the boys found, Vivian said, rubbing her tired eyes. Theodore rerouted specific shipments through an unauthorized vendor on days he supervised inventory. Nicholas nodded, his shoulders slumped with exhaustion. 3 days of crisis management had left dark circles under his eyes, but determination still burned within them. He betrayed everything we built together, Nicholas said quietly. 20 years of friendship, and he was willing to poison innocent people just to take my restaurants. Vivian reached across the desk, her hand covering his. Not just the restaurants. He wanted everything you have. Their eyes met, and the professional distance they'd maintained since reuniting suddenly felt paper-thin. Nicholas turned his hand beneath hers, their fingers intertwining naturally. I never replaced you, he confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. There were other women, but nothing serious. Nothing real. Vivian's breath caught. Nicholas. I kept wondering what I did wrong, he continued, the words tumbling out after years of containment. I thought maybe I hadn't shown you enough how much you mattered. I threw myself into work because it was the only thing that didn't hurt. Vivian's eyes glistened with unshed tears. I was so certain you didn't want a family. When I found out I was pregnant, it seemed kinder to disappear than force you to choose. Nicholas stood, moving around the desk until he was beside her chair. He knelt down, bringing them face to face. I would have chosen you. Every time, I would have chosen you and our children. The professional barriers between them crumbled completely. Vivian leaned forward, her hand trembling slightly as she touched his face. Nicholas closed the remaining distance between them, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that carried 12 years of longing. The kiss deepened, tender at first, then increasingly urgent. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing heavily. We should probably get back to these reports, Vivian said with a shaky laugh, though her eyes never left his. Nicholas smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes for the first time in days. Probably. But neither moved away. 2 evenings later, Nicholas stood outside Vivian's apartment door, balancing takeout containers from his grandmother's original recipes. He'd spent the afternoon in his home kitchen, cooking dishes from the early days of their relationship. Luke answered his knock, eyebrows rising at the sight of the food. Mom, Dad's here with dinner! The word Dad still sent a warm jolt through Nicholas's chest every time he heard it. Vivian appeared from the kitchen, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, wearing faded jeans and a simple t-shirt. Nicholas thought she had never looked more beautiful. I thought you might be tired of takeout pizza, he explained, holding up the containers. The family gathered around the small dining table, the twins peppering Nicholas with questions about the investigation while they ate. "The health department is reviewing our evidence tomorrow," Nicholas explained. "Theodore doesn't know we've discovered his scheme yet." As the meal progressed, the conversation drifted to lighter topics. Nicholas and Vivian found themselves sharing stories from their early relationship. "Your mother used to leave sketches on napkins at every restaurant we visited," Nicholas told the boys, his eyes soft with remembrance. "I kept every single one." "You did?" Vivian looked surprised. Nicholas nodded. "They're in a box in my closet, along with ticket stubs from every movie we saw together." Liam and Luke exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them as they observed the tenderness between their parents. "Remember that tiny Italian place where the power went out?" Vivian asked, smiling at the memory. Nicholas laughed. "The owner lit candles all over the restaurant and served us anyway. You said it was the most romantic dinner we ever had." "It was," she confirmed softly. The twins watched this exchange with growing interest, seeing their parents not just as mom and the newly discovered dad, but as two people with a history and possibly a future together. Across town, Theodore paced his penthouse, phone pressed to his ear. "I don't care what it costs. I need those documents altered before tomorrow's health department review." He paused, listening. "Barrett is getting too close to the truth. We need to accelerate the timeline." He ended the call and walked to his window, staring out at the city lights. On his desk lay an open folder containing photographs of Nicholas and Vivian leaving the restaurant office together the previous night, their hands intertwined. "You always did take what should have been mine, Nicholas," Theodore muttered, closing the folder with a decisive snap. "Not this time." He picked up his phone again, dialing another number. "It's time for Phase 3. Tomorrow." Next day, Theodore's smile was all polished charm as he ushered Vivian and the twins through the darkened restaurant. "I wanted you to see how your designs look at night, with just the ambient lighting. It's quite spectacular." Vivian glanced around, pride warming her chest as she took in her work. The restaurant transformation was nearly complete. Warm copper accents caught the low light, while the textured walls she'd selected created depth and intimacy. "It really does look different after hours," she admitted, running her hand along a custom-built divider. Luke remained close to his mother, eyes narrowed slightly as he studied Theodore. Something about the man's too-perfect smile had always struck him as false. "Can we see the kitchen?" Liam asked eagerly. "Dad showed us how the line setup works, but I wanted to see how the new layout flows." Theodore's smile tightened almost imperceptibly at the boy's casual reference to Nicholas as Dad. "Of course," he said smoothly. "And there's a special surprise in the walk-in freezer. The new organizational system your mother designed is being implemented there first." As they entered the kitchen, Theodore's phone rang. He checked the screen and frowned dramatically. "I need to take this. Emergency with one of our suppliers. Why don't you three check out the freezer? I'll be right back." The moment they stepped inside the massive walk-in, Theodore moved with practiced efficiency. He adjusted the thermostat control panel outside the door, overriding the safety settings and rapidly dropping the temperature. Then he slid a small metal wedge into the door latch mechanism before pulling it firmly shut. Inside, Vivian was pointing out the new color-coded storage system when they heard the distinctive click of the door closing. "That's odd," she murmured, walking to the entrance. She pushed against the heavy door, but it didn't budge. "Theodore?" she called, her voice rising with the first flutter of concern. "The door seems to be stuck." Outside, Theodore was already halfway across the restaurant, car keys in hand. Few hours across town, Nicholas sat across from Theodore in his office, staring in disbelief at the documents spread before him. "This is absurd," Nicholas said, pushing away the papers purporting to show Vivian selling company secrets. Vivian would never do this. Theodore's expression was a perfect mask of regretful concern. I didn't want to believe it either, but the evidence is clear. She's been feeding information to coastal cuisine groups since she gained access to our plans. These are forgeries, Nicholas insisted, rising from his chair. Where is Vivian now? I want to hear her side. She said she was taking the boys home, Theodore replied smoothly. But that's not important right now. What matters is containing this before it becomes public. Sign over your controlling shares to me, and I'll make this disappear. For the boys' sake. Nicholas's eyes narrowed. You really expect me to believe that Vivian, who's been working day and night to help save this company, is secretly sabotaging it? People do surprising things when money's tight, Theodore said with a practiced sigh. And she was quite desperate before you came back into her life, wasn't she? Before Nicholas could respond, his phone vibrated. He glanced down, ready to ignore it, then froze when he saw Luke's name. Something in his gut tightened. Luke never called this late. He answered immediately. Luke? The connection was terrible, the boy's voice breaking up. Dad. Freezer. Theodore. Trapped. Cold. Luke. Nicholas gripped the phone tighter. Where are you? Restaurant. Freezer, Mom and Liam. The call cut out. Nicholas's head snapped up, eyes locking with Theodore's. In that moment, he saw something flicker behind his partner's concerned facade, a cold satisfaction that confirmed everything. What have you done? Nicholas demanded, already moving toward the door. Theodore stepped into his path. Sign the papers, Nicholas. Then I'll tell you which restaurant they're in. You're insane, Nicholas growled, shoving past him. There are 17 locations in the city, Theodore called after him. You'll never find them in time. The temperature in that freezer is dropping by the minute. Nicholas froze, hand on the doorknob. If anything happens to them, then sign, Theodore said, sliding the papers across the desk. Your company for your family. Isn't that the choice you claimed you would have made 12 years ago? Nicholas's phone vibrated again, a text message from Luke with just 2 words before the signal died completely. Downtown location. Without hesitation, Nicholas bolted for the door. Theodore grabbed his coat, following close behind. You're making a mistake, Nicholas, he called. Sign the papers, and I'll call someone to let them out. But Nicholas was already racing down the hallway, heart pounding with fear for his family trapped in the freezing cold. Nicholas's car screeched to a halt outside the downtown restaurant, tires smoking against the pavement. The building stood dark except for security lights, its elegant facade now sinister in the night shadows. He fumbled with his keys, hands shaking as he unlocked the front door and burst inside. Vivian! Luke! Liam! His voice echoed through the empty dining room. Heavy footsteps sounded behind him as Theodore entered, breathing hard from the chase. They can't hear you, Theodore said, moving to block Nicholas's path toward the kitchen. The freezer is too well insulated. That's why we pay extra for the premium models, remember? Nicholas lunged forward, but Theodore stepped directly in his way. Sign the papers, Theodore demanded, pulling the folded documents from his jacket. I have someone on standby to release them the moment you transfer ownership. 1 signature, and this all goes away. Get out of my way, Nicholas growled. How long do you think they can last in there? Theodore's voice was almost conversational. The temperature's down to 15 degrees by now. The boys are what, 12? Small bodies lose heat quickly. Nicholas's fist connected with Theodore's jaw before he could finish the thought. Theodore stumbled backward but recovered quickly, wiping blood from his lip with a smirk. Always so impulsive, he said. That's why I was the business mind and you were just the chef. Sign the papers, Nicholas. Nicholas feinted left, then dove right, trying to get around him, but Theodore anticipated the move, shoving him hard against the bar. Bottles crashed to the floor as Nicholas regained his balance. They trusted you, Nicholas said, circling carefully. The boys liked you. They'll be fine, if you sign. Theodore tapped his watch. But I wouldn't waste much more time deciding. Nicholas's eyes darted around the restaurant, searching for options. His gaze landed on the fire alarm on the wall behind Theodore. The restaurant's emergency protocols flashed through his mind. All secure areas automatically unlocked during a fire alert. He lunged forward again, grappling with Theodore. They crashed into tables, sending chairs flying. Nicholas drove Theodore backward with desperate strength, inching closer to the alarm. Theodore's elbow caught him hard in the ribs, sending a bolt of pain through his side. "You never deserved any of this," Theodore hissed. "Not the restaurants, not Vivian, not those boys." With a final surge of strength, Nicholas slammed Theodore against the wall and reached past him, smashing his palm against the fire alarm. The piercing wail filled the restaurant as emergency lights began flashing. Theodore's eyes widened in realization. "No!" Nicholas shoved him aside and sprinted toward the kitchen. The alarm system was already working. He could hear locks disengaging throughout the building. He burst through the swinging doors, racing past gleaming countertops toward the massive freezer. When he yanked the door open, a cloud of frigid air billowed out. Inside, huddled together against the back wall, were Vivian and the twins. Their faces were pale, lips tinged blue, arms wrapped around each other for warmth. "Nicholas," Vivian whispered through chattering teeth. He rushed forward, gathering Luke and Liam under each arm. "Can you walk?" he asked Vivian, who nodded weakly. "Get them out," she managed, pushing herself up. Nicholas guided them toward the door, the boys stumbling on numbed feet. As they reached the threshold, a crash sounded behind them. Theodore had followed them into the kitchen and was pulling at a tall metal shelving unit. "If I can't have the company, no one will!" he screamed, yanking the shelving unit toward them. Nicholas saw it toppling, directly toward his family. Without hesitation, he shoved Vivian and the twins forward through the doorway, then turned back as hundreds of pounds of metal and supplies crashed down. Vivian's scream pierced the air as she watched Nicholas disappear beneath the avalanche of kitchen equipment. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Theodore stood frozen, staring at the destruction he'd caused. When he tried to flee, Luke stuck out his foot, sending him crashing to the floor where Vivian pinned him down until police officers burst through the door. Paramedics worked frantically to free Nicholas from the debris. When they finally loaded him onto a stretcher, his face was ghostly pale, blood seeping through bandages hastily wrapped around his head and torso. In the ambulance, Vivian clutched his hand while the twins watched in horror, their own treatment for hypothermia momentarily forgotten. "Nicholas, stay with us," Vivian pleaded as the monitors beeped erratically. His eyes fluttered open, focusing on her with effort. "Vivian," he whispered, "promise me. Tell the boys every day how much I love them. If I don't..." "You're going to be fine," she insisted, tears streaming down her face. "None of it meant anything," he continued, his voice fading. "All the success, worthless without you three to share it with." His eyes closed as the ambulance raced through the night, the paramedics calling out vital signs that grew more concerning by the minute. The hospital room was quiet, except for the steady beeping of monitors and the occasional squeak of nurses' shoes in the hallway. Liam and Luke sat on either side of Nicholas's bed, their faces drawn with worry, but no longer distant. 3 days had passed since the freezer incident, and though Nicholas remained heavily sedated much of the time, the doctors assured them he would recover. "Remember when I broke my arm climbing that tree in the park?" Luke said, gently touching his father's bandaged hand. "Mom was so scared, but I just kept saying I needed to get to the top." "You were always so stubborn," Liam added with a small smile. "Dad, I wish you could have been there when I won the art contest in 4th grade. My painting was of a kitchen. I didn't even realize then why I was so drawn to cooking scenes." Vivian stood by the window, watching her sons with Nicholas. The way they said "Dad" now, so natural, as if they'd been saying it their whole lives, brought tears to her eyes. "When you get better," Luke continued, "you have to teach me that sauce you were showing us." The one your grandmother made. And I want to redesign the menus, Liam said. Mom says I have a good eye for design, just like her. The twins continued talking, filling the silence with stories of their childhood. All the moments Nicholas had missed, but now offered as a bridge between past and future. Their voices, once guarded around him, now carried hope and plans. When a nurse suggested the boys might want something from the cafeteria, they reluctantly agreed, promising to bring back coffee for their mother. Alone with Nicholas, Vivian moved to the chair beside his bed. She took his hand between both of hers, studying the calluses and small burns that marked a lifetime in kitchens. "I never stopped loving you," she whispered, her voice catching. "I convinced myself I was doing the right thing by leaving. That night, hearing you tell that investor family would never be your priority, it broke my heart, but I was so afraid of holding you back from your dreams." She wiped away a tear. "You were brilliant, Nicholas. Your restaurants, your vision. I couldn't be the reason you gave that up. So I made the choice for both of us, and it was the biggest mistake of my life." Nicholas's fingers twitched in her grasp, and his eyes slowly opened, focusing on her face with unexpected clarity. "Vivian," he whispered, his voice hoarse. She leaned closer. "You're awake. I should call the nurse." "No." His fingers tightened around hers. "Need to tell you something first." He took a labored breath. "My greatest regret wasn't almost losing my first restaurant. It was losing you." His free hand moved weakly toward the small table beside the bed. "Top drawer." Confused, Vivian opened the drawer and found his wallet. Nicholas nodded slightly. "Inside." She opened it and gasped. There, in a small pocket, was a diamond ring she'd never seen before. Vintage, elegant, and unmistakably meant for her. "Bought it 12 years ago," Nicholas said. "Carried it ever since, waiting for you to come back." Tears spilled freely down Vivian's cheeks. "All this time. Success means nothing without love," he whispered. "Took me losing everything to understand that." The twins returned, pausing in the doorway at the sight of their mother crying and their father awake. They rushed forward, careful of the tubes and wires, but eager to be close. "Dad!" they exclaimed in unison. Nicholas smiled weakly. "My boys," he said, his voice gaining strength. "I have plans for us." Over the following weeks, as Nicholas recovered, those plans took shape. Vivian accepted a permanent position as design director for the restaurant group. The twins split their time between school, the hospital, and helping with their mother's first major project, restoring Nicholas's grandmother's original restaurant location. One evening, when Nicholas was finally strong enough to leave the hospital for a short trip, he asked to visit the renovation site. With Liam and Luke on either side supporting him, he walked slowly into the transformed space that started his career. In the center of the room stood Vivian, surrounded by candlelight, her hands clasped nervously in front of her. "What's happening?" she asked, looking from Nicholas to the twins. The boys guided their father forward, then stepped back with matching grins. Nicholas, still thin from his hospital stay but standing tall, reached into his pocket and pulled out the ring he'd carried for 12 years. "Vivian Winters," he said, his voice steady despite his weakened state. "Will you finally make me the happiest man in the world?" The twins moved to stand on either side of their father, beaming as they announced in unison, "His best men approve the question." If you enjoyed this story, I found another special one just for you. Our community can't stop talking about how heartwarming and moving it is. Click on the video in front of you to experience this beautiful story. I found another special one just for you. Our community can't stop talking about how heartwarming and moving it is. Click on the video in front of you to experience this beautiful story before it's gone.